Hello.
Hi, Sugar and Spice back again.
Yes.
Yeah, Deepthi and I. Today happens to be the 13th of February. So 13th of any month, as we know, we associate that particular date for some reason with all kinds of terrible things, unlucky things. So it's the right day for our horror tales. And we have two lined up for you today. And today also happens to be a day before a very, very important day. Yes, Deepthi?
Valentine's Day.
Yes.
Yes.
So Valentine's Day, 14th, when the whole world is celebrating love. So you may wonder why not romantic stories when it's one day before that, but we thought why not have it a little change from that. Yes?
Right.
So today we have two very, very interesting stories lined up for you. Starting with the monkey's paw. This one is from the Western world, followed by Deepti's
Aidihimala, that is a story from Kerala. It's part of the legends of Kerala. So it's a folk tale, totally different stories, and I can't wait to listen to Srija's story, which is sounding, the name itself is sounding so exciting. So Srija, you can just
Monkey's
get into
paw,
the
yes,
story,
and I
yes.
look forward to Deepti's as well, and I'm sure you all are looking forward to the same stories as well. So let's start with the first one. This one is The Monkey's Paw by W. Jacobs. The story begins in an English home. It's very warm inside, there's a fire burning, and the little family close to the fire. The old woman is sitting by the fire, knitting, looking very contented, and the father and son, Mr. White and Mr. Herbert White, are playing a game of chess. So even though it's very warm inside, it's extremely cold outside. It's snowing and there's a wind that can be heard howling through the windows. But the father and son are lost in the game that they're playing. Now, the old man, Mr. White, was making some very, very unnecessary moves in this particular game of chess. So he was on the verge of losing the game, and he was trying his best to distract his son so that that didn't happen. So he spoke about the weather outside and said, "My God, the wind is so strong today. Can you listen to it? Can you hear it?" So the son says, with complete concentration on the chessboard, "I can hear the wind. I'm listening to the wind. Check." The father got a little more desperate and he says, "I don't think our guest may come in today. Do you think he may come in such terrible weather?" "I'm sure he will, father." "Mate." The game was over. Mr. White had this burst of anger, at having lost the game, and so he said, "I don't know what I was thinking when I called him home. Who would come visiting anyway? We stay in the back of beyond. The roads are terrible outside. You step outside and your leg gets stuck in mud, and I don't think our guests will come in," and so on and so forth. And then he looked up when his wife told him very quietly from the fire, "Don't worry, dear, you'll win the next game." So he didn't know how to react, but when he saw that the mother and son were exchanging smiles, he smiled into his grey beard as well. And in this cozy, when this cozy picture comes up before our eyes, that's when the son hears footfalls outside, gate being opened, closed, and somebody walking heavily down the driveway up to the door. And he says, "I think our guest has come, father." So Mr. White rushes to the door and brings the guest in. The mother and the son can hear them talking, and Mr. White seems to be comforting the guest, saying, "Don't worry, things will work out." Obviously something terrible had happened in his life, and the two men walking. And Mr. White introduces Sergeant Major Morris to his family, and they greet him and welcome him. This sturdy, bulky man sits down by the fire. He has his healthy complexion that will, this reddish complexion that belongs to people who have spent a lot of time outdoors. And he was a very big built fellow. He looks on happily as Mr. White gets him his glass of whiskey, and they start talking. After the third glass or so, his eyes light up and he continues speaking about the wonderful things that happened to him when he was back in India. And Mr. White does say that too. Do you know that he spent almost 20 years in India? He was such a young boy when he left, and now look at him. And the sergeant continues talking about the fantastic people he met there, about the enchanting fakirs, of the temples, of things which are related to magic. And while he was going on and on about all these things, regaling his company because he loved listening to his stories, Mr. White stopped him and said, "But didn't you tell me something about a monkey's paw the other day?" A monkey's paw? His wife and his son, both of them sat up, with anybody would. A monkey's paw, something totally out of the world. I mean, it's not something that comes into a regular conversation. So they sat up and looked very expectantly at the sergeant. But the soldier tried to, go over the topic. He says, no, there's nothing much to say about that. I just happened to mention it. And he tried to move over to another topic, but Mr. White didn't let him. So his friend told him, no, you must tell us about it. You told us something about a monkey's paw. So then the Sergeant Major decided, okay, since the topic has come up, I might as well. He says, I think I have it on me. And he started feeling around in his pockets. And very soon he drew out something which looked very shriveled, something that looked very dried up. And he held it up in his hand. Mrs. White, the old woman, drew back in revulsion. She didn't want to touch it. But Herbert put out his hand and took it in his hand. He says, what is this? And Mr. White took it from his son after that and examined it as well. And he says, this looks like a mummified paw. He says, yes, that's what it is. It is a monkey's paw. And this particular paw is quite special. What can be possibly special about something that looks so gross, is what they wanted to know. So he said, no, this one is magical in the sense that a great fakir, a very holy man, put a curse on it, or maybe you could call it a spell, because he wanted to prove to people that you cannot mess around with fate. And if you do, fate rules our lives, and if you try to mess around with that, you're going to suffer in some way for it. So, which is why he put a spell on this particular paw. What kind of spell? Herbert wanted to know. He said, 3 different men can wish on this paw, and they would get 3 of their wishes each granted. You seriously mean that people are going to get wishes out of this particularly revolting looking thing? And he says, yes. And looking at his expression, his serious expression, the family decided that they shouldn't joke about it, because he looked very serious about it, like he believed in it. And so Herbert asks him, and did you get your 3 wishes, sir? So he says, yes, I did. And the soldier wasn't ready to continue. He continued drinking his whiskey, looking very thoughtful. He drained his glass, which was refilled again, and looking at the general quietness of the lot, sitting around the fire, the lady said, let me go set the table. I'll set dinner out for you. And when she was getting up to do that, Mr. White asked his friend, tell me, Morris, if you got your 3 wishes, then this particular paw is of no use to you. Why do you keep it with you? He says, well, I suppose I have a fancy. Then I did think of selling it to somebody. Well, why didn't you? The people don't believe this, they call it nonsense when I talk about magic. And there have been suggestions where people have told me, let me have my 3 wishes, and then if I get them granted, I'll pay you. So it doesn't work like that. And while he was talking, the Sergeant Major Morris all of a sudden just picked up that paw and threw it into the fire. This was quite unexpected. They didn't expect him to do that, but Mr. White screamed and rushed up to the fire and pulled it out before it could burn. And he said, why did you do that? If you don't need it, give it to me, I'll keep it. So the sergeant tells him, no, I don't think you should do that. Please let it burn. It has caused nothing but misery to people, and I think you should throw it. But you said you got your 3 wishes. He says, yes, I did. But I got the paw after the first person who wished on it, and the 3rd wish that he wished for was death. That's how I got the paw. One more person can wish on this paw, but I don't want you to use it. Let it burn, he says, looking very sad. But Mr. White pocketed it anyway. Dinner happened, and while Mrs. White was setting the table, she jokingly told her husband, "If you must wish on that paw, why don't you wish for an extra pair of hands for me? That would help me in my daily work. So there's so much work around the house." But Mr. White actually pulled out the paw, with a laugh. And they were surprised when the sergeant major got up in alarm and stopped him and said, "Please, if you must wish, please wish for something sensible. Don't play the fool with it. What I told you is true." So Mr. White put the paw back into his pocket and said, "Okay, come on, old fellow, now let's get a little cheery. We've been down, all of us, we've been too serious, now it's time for dinner." And so they went on, they had dinner, and they followed by coffee. And the soldier, regaled the little family with tales of his brave, exploits back in India. And finally, when he left and Mr. White came back, his wife looked at him curiously and said, "So, what did you pay him for the paw? Did you pay him anything? So, did you give him anything for it?" And he looked a little sheepish when he said, "Yes, I did. He didn't want it, but I insisted. I paid him for it. But he still told me not to wish on it. He says not to use it. I wonder why. He seems very serious about what he said." So the son says, I hope the tales that he's been telling us are true, because what he's told us about the monkey's paw, I find it hard to believe. And he must have just been telling us a whole lot of tall tales. And they all sit around and laugh. But the old man looks at the paw. And Herbert says, "Well, why don't you wish? Let's see if it works." So he says, "I could, but I think I have everything I want. So what could I possibly want? What could I possibly want?" So Herbert placed his hand on his father's shoulder and said, "Maybe you could ask for, let's say, around 200 pounds. That should help you. You wanted to pay off the last amount that you had to pay off for a house, isn't it? So if you paid it off, you would be completely comfortable. I mean, no debts to pay off. And that would be the best thing you could ask for." So Mr. White smiled at his son. That was such a sensible thing to say, and he held it up the way the soldier had asked him to, in his right hand, and he wished aloud for 200 pounds. Now when he did that, his son grandly went to the piano and played a few chords to give it that dramatic effect, because they were still laughing about it. None of them believed what was about the stories about the paw. But after wishing, Mr. White screamed in absolute terror. His wife and son rushed to him and said, "What happened? What happened?" And they found the paw on the ground, and he said, "It moved." "What moved?" they asked him. "That paw, it moved. It twisted like a snake in my hand," he said in revulsion. And they said, "No, I'm sure you must have imagined it." And Herbert picked it up and placed it on the table. "I think the story has got to you, and I don't see any money anywhere, so I don't think it's happening." And they wait around, and then they start laughing, and they say, "Come, we should go." But somehow the laughter didn't have the mirth that it had earlier, and after a while the old couple retired to bed. Herbert sat around for a little while, and he was a person who he was a playful person by nature, so he tried to cheer himself up, because it did feel dismal in the room. So he stared into the dying fire. It was almost out, and when he looked at it, he was shocked to see some of the most terrifying faces peering up at him through the fire. And the last face looked so much like a very evil-looking monkey face that he actually looked around for a glass of water to throw on the fire and put it out. He felt he couldn't take it anymore. But when he reached out for the glass of water on the table, all that his fingers closed upon was a cold, dried, mummified monkey's paw. He pushed it away in revulsion, wiped his hand on his coat, and decided to call it a night. And he went up to bed. Now the next part of the story you move into is the next day. The morning is bright, even though it's cold outside, the bright winter sun shining through the windows, and the room feels very, very chirpy, and all the dismal thoughts of the previous night are no longer there. And the family is very happy at the table, and they're laughing. And the old woman says, "What nonsense. He fed us all those tales about this monkey's paw and the wishes that, who gives wishes these days? Does magic ever happen?" All these discussions. And the son laughed as well, and he said, and she went on to say, "And how could 200 pounds hurt anybody? It's money for her, for crying out loud. How would it hurt?" So Herbert said, "You never know, it may just drop out from the sky on Dad's head. That could hurt him." And they start laughing. And he says, "Okay, I'm going to leave now, But remember, when you get the money, you're not going to get into the money, open the money up before I come, because you'll be a greedy old man then, you know. The son playfully teases his father and he leaves for work. His mother, as she did every day, walks up to the door and sees him walking down the drive waving to her, comes back to the table. The day goes by very peacefully, but it doesn't stop the old woman from looking all the time, you know, out of the window to see if somebody was coming in with the money. Yes, so people always wish, and 200 pounds wouldn't hurt. And she kept going up, and the only time somebody knocked on the door, it was to give them some bills, you know, some unpaid bills. So she was quite irritated about the whole thing, and she was sitting down and talking to her husband at supper. And when they were talking, she told her husband, I'm sure Herbert will come back with some more tales to tease us. And her husband laughed. But as he laughed and looked at his wife, he realized that she wasn't looking at him. She was staring out of the window. She was staring at somebody out of the window. That's when he turned back to see a very well-dressed man standing near the gate. Now, the old woman had been looking and watching this person, because he had come up to their gate about 3 times, tried to open it, and then stepped back and walked away again like he didn't want to enter. And the last time when the old man looked, he did decide to enter. It was with a look of determination on his face. So when she saw him enter, she couldn't help noticing that he had a very shiny silk new hat on. So they were expecting something good to happen. So she quickly put away her apron, tucked it under the pillow cushion of her chair, and she rushed up to the door and let the stranger in. He walked in, and he stood silently for a while, and they waited patiently, and says, okay, you're from, is there any reason you've come to visit us? So he says, I'm from the Moore and Meggins. Now when the name comes out, the old woman feels a sense of panic. He says, Herbert, is everything okay with him? Because that was the company that their son worked at. So he says, is he hurt? So he says, and the old man tries to comfort her, saying, don't worry, I'm sure he hasn't come with anything bad. You're overreacting. Sit down. I'm sure it'll be fine. But she kept looking at him, and she continued. She asked him again, is he hurt? So the stranger looks at them and says, I'm sorry, I represent the company. I'm only here to tell you what they asked me to convey to you. Yes, he's badly hurt. He's badly hurt? Is he in pain? The old woman asked, trying to understand what the stranger was trying to tell them. Says, he's badly hurt, ma'am, but he's no longer in pain. The old man looked relieved for a minute, but his wife immediately figured out what the man was trying to say, and she looked in shock at him and said, what are you telling us? So he says, he got caught in the machinery, and he tells this to the old man, your son is no more. The old man stared at him in shock. He couldn't quite figure out what he was trying to hear, what the stranger was trying to tell him. And he says, you mean he's dead? He says, yes, he's dead. We couldn't save him. Like I told you, he was far too caught deep in the machinery before we could pull him out. But the company wants to tell you that even though they don't have any legal obligations towards paying you anything by way of loss, they appreciated the work that your son did for the company, so they are going to give you a sum of money just to show how much they cared. The old woman sat still. She couldn't react in any way, but the old man looked at the stranger with bleak eyes and asked him, how much are they paying? And he said, 200 pounds. The old man screamed and, reaching out like a blind man, collapsed on the ground senseless. The third part of the story moves to the home again. The old couple had buried Herbert at a distance away in a brand new cemetery away from the house, and they were back now trying to lead normal lives, which they really couldn't, because there was no longer any happiness left. They hardly spoke. They just existed, as it were, and almost a week had passed. When night set in and the old man was trying to sleep in the cold night on his bed, he got up when he heard sobs from the window. He looked up to see his wife standing yet again near the window, crying softly. He says, come back. He told her tenderly, come back to bed. Why are you standing near the window? You're going to get sick. She said, but it's cold. It's not as cold for me as it is for my poor son, my darling boy. He's all alone there in the cemetery, no one with him. The old man knew it would be futile trying to comfort her, so he again drifted off to sleep when a sudden shriek from his wife woke him up. He jumped up. What happened? She said, the paw, the monkey's paw. You still have it. Did you throw it away? He says, the monkey's paw? Are you out of your mind, woman? Why do you want the monkey's paw, that evil thing? You want it again? Oh, you don't understand. She rushed up to him and kissed him happily and said, come, you have to get it for me. Why would you want it? Are you out of your mind? The old man asked, feeling that old sense of panic coming up in him. Anything to do with the monkey's paw scared him. And she said, and he told her, what is it that you want with the paw? She says, you forget we have 2 wishes left. You only used 1 wish. So she says, we have lost everything we have. Now what do you want the monkey's paw for? She said, don't you understand, old man? We can wish our son back. Go and wish him back alive. I want my son back again. If the monkey's paw could do this, it can give us back our son. The old man trembled and he sat up, trying to reason with his wife. And he told her, look, I didn't tell you, but when I went to identify the body of our son, I could only identify him by his clothes. There was nothing left of him. And you want your son alive? She said, are you? She looked at him scornfully and said, I nursed that boy. You think I'm scared of him? Wish my boy back. And her face had taken on a look of madness that frightened the old man. He knew he couldn't stop her. So he said, okay, I'll get it for you. And taking a candle, he went down the stairs as slowly as he could. And he was so scared. In fact, when he saw the monkey's paw, which he knew had kept it on top of an old cabinet, and when he was reaching out for it, he looked around in fright. He wondered if the wish that his wife wanted his son back, if even without saying it, if it would come true if he approached the monkey's paw. He was that frightened. But he took it anyway. He loved his wife. And he slowly went to the bottom of the stairs. And he heard his wife, did you find it? Come up, bring it up. And he tried telling her, I don't think we should do this. But she wouldn't listen. So he wished. He brought it up and he wished anyway. Held it up and wished for his son. I would like to have my son back alive again. He threw down the monkey's paw and shivering he went and sat on the chair while his wife rushed to the window and waited. She opened the window and waited. She was waiting for her son. And he waited and they kept waiting and the candle slowly died out. And with a huge sigh of relief, the old man realized it wasn't going to happen. He slowly went to bed and he lay down in the darkness. His wife, after a few minutes, disappointed, walked up and lay down with him. But sleep wouldn't come to Mr. White. He was disturbed and he hated this darkness, so he thought he had to get a candle, and the candles were downstairs. So he lit a match and summoned up the courage. He was still terrified. He was sweating. He was almost feverish with fear, but he went down the stairs slowly. And when he reached the bottommost stair, he heard a sound. He stopped and listened again. It was a quiet knock. A soft knock, like the person who knocked didn't want others to know that he or she was there knocking on the door. Mr. White froze. His blood turned cold. The matchstick that he held went out. He was in darkness. Then the knock sounded again. This was more insistent this time. Throwing the matchbox down, he rushed up the stairs, back to his bedroom, went in and shut the door. His wife told him, I heard a sound. What was that? He said, it's nothing, dear. Must have been a rat. But then the knocking started. Loud, insistent on the door. As if the person wanted to be let in immediately. And Mrs. White heard it. The old woman heard. She said, it's my son. Oh, how could I have forgotten? Cemetery is so far away. He needed to walk to get here. And she rushed down the stairs. Opened the door, but Mr. White was too petrified to move. She pushed her husband aside, opened the door of the bedroom and rushed down the stairs. And as she rushed down the stairs, she called out to him, come, open the door for me. But she realized her husband was not going to help her. She rushed down and he could hear, Mr. Herbert could hear the lower bolt of the door being pulled open. Then he could hear her fumbling for the upper bolt and then her anguished cry, oh, come down, I cannot reach the upper bolt, you'll have to help me with it. But he wasn't going anywhere. He was down on his hands and knees looking for the paw that he had flung down. Where was the monkey's paw? He had to get it. It was pitch dark and he couldn't find it. He heard his wife pull up a chair. She pulled up the chair to the door and stood on it, he could hear her reaching out for the upper bolt, and it was slowly pulled open. And she pulled back the chair in order to open the door. But Mr. White found the paw. He held it up in his right hand and he wished his third and last wish. And then he waited. He heard once again an anguished cry from his wife. It gave him enough courage to run down the stairs. She had opened the door and stood there looking out, but there was nobody there. It gave him the courage to rush out right up to the gate and look beyond the street, beyond the gate. The street that opened up in the lamplight was a deserted one. There was nobody, nothing there. And the story of the monkey's paw ends there.
Lovely.
Yes.
I was so lost. It was a lovely story, Shrija. Excellent.
So that's one, if you could call it a horror tale.
Yes.
We move on to something which is again very, very descriptive and very interesting. Yes, Deepthi, your turn now.
Yes. So the descriptions in your story were awesome, I must say, before I start mine. I really was on the edge. Anyway.
It's one of those creepy tales which I
Right.
still, I don't read it. If I do read it now, I don't read it at night. Yes, because somehow it creeps you out, even if
It
you know what
actually
it's
does.
all about.
Yes. No. Even with the way you said it was literally like watching a movie, I must say, because
Thank
I
you.
was so lost in it, really. I wasn't
Thank you.
even thinking about anything else, just, totally into it.
Yeah.
So excellent.
Thank
I
you,
hope the
Deepthi.
viewers also
I
felt
hope
the
they
same.
liked,
Yes. Do tell us how you liked
Yeah,
it.
we like your feedback. Yeah.
Right.
Now for your story, Deepthi.
I will move on to mine now.
Yeah.
So mine is folklore from Kerala, and it's part of the famous story Legends of Kerala, and it is in Malayalam, which is translated to English. And it speaks about these various practices that were there in Kerala, and it's very, very interesting and colorful. So one of those stories talk about this aristocratic Brahmin family in Kerala, in the district of Kottayam in Kerala. It's on the banks of the river Meenachilar. So this family is known as the Kaladi Illam. It is famous for its, all the members of this family apparently are famous tantrics or exorcists, and they are very well versed in tantrams and mantrams and vedams and upanishads and all kinds of different methods that were used to capture evil spirits.
Okay.
And all those things. Yeah, it was done. Even the temple, the temples in Kerala are quite different from temples elsewhere. They follow the tantric way, they say. So those were this is one of the families which was very famous. Even now to this day they are very famous for a lot of things. So this, I'm going to tell you the story about a bhattadari of this family called the Kaladi Illam. So many years ago, many centuries ago I must say, a young bhattadari of this family wished to see the famous Trishur Puram. Now Trishur Puram, as you all must have heard, it is a very, very famous gala festival in which is held in the district of Trishur in Kerala, where there are a lot of elephant processions and firecrackers. Even to this day it is celebrated. So he wanted to see the Trishur Puram, and it was such a strong wish, and he told his wife about it. His wife was pregnant at that time, and he was the only male member of that family, and somehow she didn't feel good about it, and she said, please don't go. But he was not ready to listen. He was so adamant that he wanted to see the event, and he asked another friend of his, another Brahmin, another Nambudiri, to accompany him. Now they both decided to go anyway, and those days it was almost a distance of 80 miles from Kottayam to Trishur, and they would have to either walk or use canoes when they had to cross rivers and all. But they set off on their journey anyway, and they had such a good time. They were enjoying, they were walking the whole day. They would walk, they would see the scenery outside, and when it was dusk they would seek shelter in a wayside home, and everybody would be happy to offer them shelter and food. and they would get up the next morning and leave again. Now 4 days passed by like this. On the 5th day, they reached the banks of the river Churuni River. It was a place called Irinyalakuda. It was almost very close to reaching Thrissur. So when they had finished their evening prayers and all that, on a wayside home, there was a Brahmin home there. So he said that, why don't you stay the night here in my place? So they said, no, we're just almost, we are very close to reaching our destination. I think we will continue with our journey today. We do not wish to stay here. So, but he insisted, he said the route that you're going to take is not at all safe. At this time of the night, it is not safe to travel. So they said, but anyway, we are going to, continue our journey for today. It's fine, we'll take care of ourselves. And they politely refused his invitation. And they both set off on their journey. And after a few hours, it was almost midnight. By then, they reached this notorious place called Yakshi Parambu. So Yakshi means a fearful female demon in Malayalam, and Parambu means a stretch of land. So they had reached this place which was notorious for these creatures, for these female demons called Yakshis. And they were now getting a little desperate, and they were looking out for a place to spend the night. They couldn't find any, but what they found were two beautiful young damsels, two ladies, standing on the wayside, and they were relieved actually to see them, and they went up to them and introduced themselves. So on listening to them, they said, are you crazy? Why you people traveling at this time of the night? You have to come with us. We have a humble abode nearby. You have to come and spend the night with us, and then you can proceed in the morning. The young Brahmins were very happy seeing these beautiful young ladies, inviting them, to stay with them. And one of these ladies, she was blue-eyed and she was very beautiful, and she looked at Bhattadri with a seductive glance and said, please follow us. And they happily did. They both followed these two young women who were walking in front with a rhythmic swaying of their hips and with their hair flowing in the breeze. And these two men were more than happy to follow them to their houses. So once they reached their house, it was a thatched house with a thatched roof and all that, and they did not feel anything unusual there. So they were ushered into these chambers, into two separate chambers by these two ladies, and the blue-eyed lady took Bhattadri to her room, went inside and softly bolted the door. When she looked back at him, he was overjoyed. He had never expected luck to strike this way, So before he could talk or, utter a word to her, something happened, and suddenly she transformed into this fearful looking demon with bloodshot eyes and sharp teeth, and as fearful as you can imagine. She was very, very huge, and as soon as he set eyes on her, he fainted. Now in the other room, his friend, the other Nambudiri, had a book with him, a holy book, which was called the Devi Mahatmyam. It had the names of goddesses written in it, and he had the practice of chanting it every night before going to sleep, and he used to keep it under his pillow and sleep. Now he had this book in his hand. Now the other lady was constantly coaxing him to keep that book aside. We know for what now, but he refused. Luckily for him, he refused. He said, no, I do this, I keep it under my pillow. So when she was going on, forcing him to do that, what he did was, he started getting a little suspicious. So he clung on to the book, and he started hearing fearful groans and sounds of blood sucking and bones breaking from the other room. This gave him the signal that something wrong was going on. So he just closed his eyes and he clung on to this book, and spent the whole night chanting the names of goddesses as he would do. And he did not realize what was happening the rest of the night. And then, when it was morning, he opened his eyes to see that he was sitting on top of this palm tree. There was no house, there were no ladies. He was sitting there, and he managed to climb down. He looked around for his friend, but all he could see was in the adjacent palm tree, there was another palm tree next to, and below that there were human nails, and there was this knot of hair. Those days Nambudiri men used to have this knot here, and that knot was lying there with nails and bones. With a shock, he realized that what had happened the previous night, and he rushed to the Bhattagiri's home to break this sad news to his wife. Now, the lady was obviously shattered. She had asked her husband not to go, but maybe this was his destiny. And in spite of such a sad situation, the only good thing which happened to her was, in due course of time, she was relieved with the fact that she gave birth to this very, very radiant looking sweet boy. She had a son, and the only thing she would look at the boy's face and she would forget all her sorrows. And as a dutiful wife, she brought her son up to be, and he grew up to be this pious, handsome, intelligent young man when he grew up. And again, like all the other male members of the family, he was also called the Bhattagiri, and he was very, very knowledgeable. He was a very bright child right from when he was very small. And when he grew up to be older, his mother decided that now it was the time for him to know about his father's death. So she told him all about it, and this is how it happened. And the son was he was shattered, and more than that, he was angered, and he decided on that day that he would take revenge on this Yakshi who had killed his father. Now, he knew that it was not easy, and he had a lot of things to learn before he could find himself powerful enough to destroy that Yakshi. So for this purpose, he decided that he is going to go on a very severe penance to please the sun god on the Surya Bhagavan. And after a very, very long period of penance, one morning, he saw that a young Brahmin had come to his house. As soon as he saw him, he realized that it was none other than Surya Bhagavan himself. He fell at his feet and asked him for his blessings. And Surya Bhagavan blessed him and gave him a Grantham, it's a Sanskrit name for a book. He gave him a full collection of all the chantings and all the mantras that he would need to be the best tantric or the best exorcist, as they say. So the book has everything, Surya Bhagavan told him, and you can follow this book and you will be blessed. And he was so happily, he took the book from Surya Bhagavan, and from that day, this family and this tradition of the family which has been specially blessed by the Surya Bhagavan, so the family came to be known as Surya Kaladi, and so from Kaladi Illam it was called Surya Kaladi Illam, and the Bhattadiri started to be called Surya Bhattadiri, and his fame grew, and from that day he started being called by famous everybody from the kings to all the families that they would find it difficult to get rid of evil spirits. They would approach Bhattadiri as the last resort. So he was so famous, and he even became very, very wealthy, and he settled down with a family of his own. He got married, and he decided the only aim in his life was to destroy the Yakshi who killed his father. So for that he had to really prepare himself, and once he decided that he was ready for it, he decided that now was the time, I am going to take on this Yakshi. So he did not know who it was. So he organized a puja, a very grand one, and he arranged all the paraphernalia required for it, and he started invoking all the Yakshis of the world one by one. And each one had to, they knew the power of the Bhattadiri. So they all begged for his forgiveness, and they were made to pledge in front of the lamp and gold, which represents goddess Lakshmi. They were made to pledge in front of that they had not done it. So each one was made to do this, and finally there was only one Yakshi left. So she confessed that it was indeed her, and who had killed his father. And realizing this, the Bhattadiri got really enraged, and he was all set ready to sacrifice her in the sacrificial fire. But she pleaded, she said, please don't do this. But he was in no mood to forgive her. He said, no, I am going to destroy you. You killed my father. And now the Yakshi was enraged. She was angry, and she said, if you do that, you are going to die. You're going to die you're going to have a very, very painful death on the 41st day from today. And at least she thought that listening to this, he would let her go. But though he was taken aback, he asked, what is the method? Tell me, how can I escape this curse? So she said, if you are lucky enough to reach the famous Tiruvalur temple, it's a temple dedicated to Lord Shiva. If you are lucky enough to reach the famous temple and pray there on this particular day, you will escape the curse. So this did not stop him from destroying her. He was so angry, he just wanted to take revenge. He did not think of anything else. So he sacrificed this Yakshi in the sacrificial fire, and that was the end of that Yakshi. He forgot all about the curse though. And then life went on as usual. As I said, he was invited by many famous people to get rid of evil spirits. Now, one such invitation that he got was from the famous Pallibana Perumal. Now, the Perumal was a king from the Chera dynasty, and they ruled Kerala for a very long time apparently. And they were very powerful kings. Now, he invited Surya Kaladi Bhattadiri for curing his wife, who would conceive a child, but she could never give birth to the child because the child would die in the womb itself. They realized, they came to know that it is because of a Gandharva who had possessed her. That is the reason why this is happening. And none of the famous exorcists, none of whoever had tried to get rid of this Gandharva, they were not successful in doing so. Now he had heard that Surya Kaladi Bhattadiri is very powerful and he will surely help him. So he called for Bhattadiri, and he happily obliged. He listened to the king's sorrow, and he said, don't worry, I will find a solution for this. I will make sure that the Gandharva leaves your wife, the queen. So the queen was made to sit in, they had made these, they call it the kalam. They make a drawing using flour, and with all different colors. They put kumkum, and it is a very, very scary setup, you know, the way they arrange all the, because they are going to invoke the evil spirits and get rid of it. So all the arrangements were made, and the queen is called, the person who is possessed by the evil spirit is called the Piniyal in Malayalam. And they made her sit there. And you must have seen it in movies and all, but you know, it actually happened those days. And she was made to sit there, you know, in a state of, she was not herself. She was actually possessed by this Gandharva, and she was not acting like herself. But she was made to sit there, and constantly he started chanting the mantras and doing all the regular practices that he would do to get rid of an evil spirit. But this Gandharva was very, very strong. It was not at all easy to get rid of him. Now, the Bhattadiri realized this, but he also knew that he had promised the king he had to get rid of him somehow. Now, this is the time when his mind got a bit drifted, and he was only ruled by, the ego, maybe you can call it that, or he should not doubt his own powers, right? So he even resorted to some extreme ways of exorcism, and he would do things like sacrifice live animals, insects, and small animals. He would sacrifice them alive into the fire. Now this was totally unbecoming of a Brahmin, but he only was ruled by the thought that he had to get rid of the Gandharva somehow. They would also do something like they would soak cloth in ghee and collect ants on the cloth, and they would sacrifice these ants also in the fire alive. So these were extreme acts of exorcism, and finally the Gandharva had to give in. He presented himself in front of the Bhattadiri and he said, "Don't ask me to leave the queen. I am a loner. The Yakshi whom you killed, whom you destroyed, was my partner. She was my lover. I'm a loner now. I don't want to be like this. Let me be with the queen. Please don't ask me to go." But the Bhattadiri said, "You have to, otherwise your fate will also be the same as your lover." Finally, he started crying and cursing the Bhattadiri and said that the 11th day from now, you are going to die of a bladder disease. You're going to die in pain. Now, this was the second curse that he had received. But he was adamant that he would get rid of the Gandharva, and he sacrificed him as well in the sacrificial fire. And that was the end of the Gandharva, and the queen finally was cured, and the king was very happy and gifted him with a lot of riches. And then he left the palace on his journey back, and he decided that he would go on a pilgrimage. So on the way back, he visited many temples. He had completely forgotten about this curse, both the curses that he had received. But incidentally, he reached the same temple that both the Yakshi and the Gandharva had mentioned, the Tiruvalur temple. He reached that temple on the day that they had the Yakshi and the Gandharva had cursed. The same day he reached there. But the previous day, the people of the temple, the pujaris of the temple, had heard a voice from inside the sanctum sanctorum of the temple, that a celestial voice, that tomorrow an unnatural death is going to happen, and so please finish the puja before afternoon and close the temple. They had heard this, so that was done. But when the Bhattadiri reached there, he did not know that this had happened, so he thought, let me pray in the evening, and before that let me take a dip in the pond nearby. So he went to the pond, and as soon as he reached there, he felt an urge to urinate, and he went in to satisfy that. But as soon as he went there, the urge would disappear, and then he would come back, and then he would feel the urge again. This happened for few hours, and by then he was completely in pain. He was in so much in agony, and he rolled over. He rolled over the steps everywhere. He was tumbling, and he was moving, writhing in pain, and he was the suffering that he was going through was too much for him to take, and at the end of it he had to succumb to death. as the Yakshi and the Gandharva had cursed him. That was what happened in the end. And they say that the marks of him, rolling on the land, even you can find those marks even to this day. It is there. So that was the kind of suffering he went through. And for his posterity, his future generation, this was a lesson. They were also expert tantrics, and his future generation, but they would never resort to extreme acts of exorcism, because their father had succumbed to such a painful death, they believed, because of these reasons. So that is the story of Surya Kaladi Bhattadiri, and I hope you all liked it.
Fascinating story, Deepthi. Descriptions are so
Yes,
so
you can
vivid.
actually
You can
visualize.
actually see
Right.
them, and beautiful. And how it's very strange, isn't it, that all these stories, when they describe this kind of tantric powers on one side, there's always this clear-cut rule that you don't step a certain
Exactly.
or overstep
Exactly.
boundaries, and there
Yes.
should always be mercy in whatever you do.
Yes.
Any learning comes with that, or you
Yes.
pay for
Yes.
it. It's
Yes.
fascinating.
Yes,
Beautiful.
however great a personality you are, in these stories it's clearly said that however great you are, the moment you are ruled by, things which are not right, it is not right. Whoever you are, there is no,
And you pay a
difference.
price
You
for
pay a
it.
price for it. Yeah, that is very clear, and so it's like almost a message is there in almost all these
All
stories.
these
Those
stories.
they are so ancient, and they're so you can even to the level of being called superstitions, like you said, even in the monkey's paw story.
Exactly.
It could be superstitions, but there were so many things which are still
And when you try to mess around with things and try to
Right.
play God,
Right.
there's always something, price you pay for it,
yeah, we like to it is always fascinating to believe in such things, because then you are open to a lot of
Yes.
yeah.
So the question is, do you believe in it or not?
Correct.
But at the same time, we
You can
find
have
that-
your own opinions
Oh, yes.
on that.
And
Absolutely.
whatever said and done, people are always interested in stories like these. So
Right.
what can we say except that, hope that
Right.
you enjoyed these stories, and
Yes.
we'll be back with more. So this is a bye from Sugar and Spice. Do stay tuned. Do come on the next time we come up with a story, and we'd love your feedback.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye bye.